We're back to work a little bit further in Better Brains by Design, and we're in the designing stage. We're right at the beginning of the book. Michael Patterson, take us through the book.
Yeah, well, one of the things we talk about in this whole idea for strategic planning is chunking big ideas down into smaller bite-sized pieces, and we've actually taken that approach with the books and with the whole sort of curriculum, if you will, getting it down into little bite-sized pieces so that hopefully people can enter into this in wherever that it makes sense to them, and hopefully then get interested and take the whole idea. But there really are sort of four major areas that we cover. The first is an overview of the overall system. We're calling it the cogwheel system, sort of playing on this the cog wheels that we talk about for brain health.
So cogwell, short for cognitive wellness, cognitive well-being.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So first couple of books, or first couple of chapters, if you will, really sort of lay out the basic idea. We've covered some of this in some of our other videos. Second one is really looking, or second major section is really looking at the science behind this, because we think it's important that people understand the science. When you look at motivation, and that's actually another one of the chapters, we specifically look at motivation, but two important aspects of motivation are, A, you've got to believe that what you're doing actually works. You know, it's like, if I'm going to do something, you're going to be much more motivated to do it if you believe that it works. And second, you've got to believe that you are capable of doing it as well. So that these two aspects. So knowing the science, I think, is actually very important.
Because the science supports that fact
Yeah.
that if you have knowledge that something can work, you're motivated and it works better. If you have a negative attitude that nothing
Right.
works, then that's the opposite. You might have the potential, but if you don't believe in the science, if you don't understand that this is real, then you have lowered your potential of actually succeeding.
Exactly. And one of the things I think we do well, frankly, is take the science and translate it into plain language. And particularly in this book, this series of books, Better Brains by Design, we try not to be academic at all, but really just sort of practical. Here's why it works, and here's what you need to know. So we talk about plasticity of the brain. We talk about risk factors. We talk about protective factors. That's another short section. So the reserve theory is another idea that we go through. And so it's building these are building blocks that you need to actually understand
Hold
the
your
science.
hands up there for a moment here. The building blocks of the design book and a guidebook or a workbook are built upon the science that's in Strong Brain, Sharp Minds. And
Yeah.
by having that science available, it allows someone who may not want to know all of the science, but if there's a part of the science that they want to know the depth, we've got the foundation that's built here that our students have been using for a couple of years.
Right.
And then now we've got a guidebook, a way that you can, like an architect, plan with building materials that are really based upon the foundation of science.
Yeah, that's a great point. Another whole section of books or series of the booklets, if you will, focuses specifically on creating a strategy. How do you create a strategy? A strategy. And we've said this is very important because it's one thing to know what to do. You've really got to figure out a plan for doing it. And one of the things that we do is look at a brain health assessment. We have an assessment tool that you've worked with your students.
Since
you've done a lot of work.
2011, we've been working with that and reshaping it and always trying to update that. And that assessment tool is one that we think ripples, because a student who is using it for themselves at the beginning of class can then take a second assessment later in the term. They'll see a slight difference. And in that, we use the term courageously honest. You've got one brain, you've got one life. Be honest about where your weaknesses are as well as your strengths. And that assessment tool is really a starting point. And one of the things you and I have agreed upon from the beginning, even though we're trying to have assessments, these are general assessments. But once you have that assessment, you're not finished. You still have
Right.
to develop and design what are you going to do with it. You may be impatient. I want to get started. My brain needs help right now. Unless it's a lifetime strategy, it's doomed to a high risk of failure unless you actually have the science showing which direction to go.
Yeah, and laying out a plan and going back to your earlier point about referencing the strong brain, sharp minds. Say out of the assessment you decide, well, physical exercise and movement is an area that I'm really falling down on. So, and you get interested in that, and you're trying to figure out what kind of strategy can I do that will be effective. You can then go back to strong brain, sharp minds.
To dive deep into
Dive deep into the one section on physical exercise. You know, you don't have to read the whole book, but there's a whole section on physical exercise that will actually explain the science, and then that'll help you hone in and help you determine what kind of strategy you want to go forward. So this strategy segment deals with things like doing a SWOT analysis. For those who are familiar with it, it's like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. We borrow this from business world, but you can do the same for yourself and your own brain health. We go through how do you actually construct going from goals to objectives to strategies down to tactics, sort of getting it smaller and smaller and finer to where you're getting real action items. So we go through all of those steps. By the time you're out of that, once you've read through that series, each person will come away with an action plan, you know, very specific things that they can do. One of the first steps towards, you know, this gradual working towards helping your brain to flourish. A final segment, if you will, of series of books helps you focus more specifically on some areas that you might want to build strategies around. Well, let me go back a little bit. Going on in the strategy section, for example, being motivated, I talked about that earlier, is very important in this, and motivation is actually part of our strategy worksheet. So when you get into doing a strategy, you not only lay out what it is you want to do, but there's a little chart that we have on the bottom of each of these worksheets where you track your motivation, because motivation can vary. You can go from being extrinsically motivated, which means somebody else essentially is telling you to do this, or the influence is coming from outside, and you want to sort of move it over to where it's more intrinsically motivated, where you're doing it because you believe in it and you're finding inherent joy out of it. So working the strategy is also a process of working your motivation and working your mastery. So we have a book on mastery. It's like, what are the principles of getting better at something? And
maybe for the rest of your life, trying to master and keep going, with the goal of having this design method flexible enough to last for a lifetime and to continue to be adjusted. Your plan is adjusted depending upon your circumstances and situations that will happen.
Yeah. And it's interesting, when you look at it, we're providing these lessons sort of directed specifically towards creating a strategy around to make better brains, build better brains, but they're really life lessons that they're good for everything that you do. If you know, learning how to master something in a mindful way will serve you in any kind of situation. Same thing with motivation. With anything that we're doing, the more intrinsically motivated we can be. Willpower is another topic that we address, because it's everybody has experienced this of developing a New Year's Eve resolution. You know, we're going to get better at this. We're going to stop drinking so much. We're going to lose weight. We're going to, you know, whatever it is, and that lasts for a month or two, and then your willpower just fades. Well, there actually is a science of willpower, and we lay out what that science is and what the practices are. So we're not only giving people step-by-step how do you build a strategy, but giving them some of the tools that they will need to actually stick to it and do it.
In the Strong Brains Foundation, the subjects that are attractive or interesting, or someone needs to really understand why they're doing that,
Right.
that's where they would find that. So the companion book for the classes that we're giving in 2016 will be built around those two books together.
Yeah. And then when I started to say the final segment, the final piece is really looking at different areas. A lot of the strategies are going to be very specific to each individual, but there are certain strategies that are so general
To all humans?
to all of us that we want everybody to look at these areas. And it's things like our mindset, our belief system, the work that Carol Dweck has done in terms of identifying a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset.
A fixed mindset will have a limit, and you can't be more talented than you're born.
That's the idea. Yeah,
Is there a limit on the growth mindset? Maybe not.
Yeah. So people who have this idea that, well, I can't do math, or I'm not an athlete, or they have this fixed idea about what their capabilities are. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, essentially. People who can have this more of a growth mindset of, well, I can't do it now, but I can certainly learn. I'm capable of learning. So we not only explain those differences, but we draw on the work of Dweck and her colleagues to sort of try to point out, if you find yourself in some situation coming out of a fixed mindset, how can you free yourself from that, and how can you adopt more of a growth mindset? Other things like positivity. There's just having a positive, optimistic attitude about things makes you happier, but it also makes you more effective in what you're doing. And interesting work done by Barbara Fredrickson out of North Carolina. She has this broaden and build theory about negative emotions versus positive emotions. And essentially, positive emotions, your mind tends to open up, and you're more open-minded when you're feeling good.
When you're in that mood, that zone of positive thinking, then you're able to take a bigger picture.
Yep. Negative emotions tend to focus you, and both are appropriate at certain times. But if we're stuck in the negative mode all the time, we never give our brains the chance to open up and expand and be more creative. And that's where a lot of the growth actually happens, is in that opening. So tools like that, emotional styles we go through. So trying to hit all of these things. When you go through it, you come out of it with a strategy on what you can do from this moment on to begin really using the plasticity of your brain, using your own mind, your own intentions, your own choices about how you're going to live your life to change your brain, structure your brain so that you can live and thrive and flourish.
And at that point, you can predict your future. As we often quote Peter Drucker, the best way to predict the future is to create it yourself. And that's what we're hoping happens, is that someone will be able, at the end of that work session, where they're really working on the design, they take that first step in the right direction, followed by more steps and more steps for the rest of their lives.
Yep, really good point. You can either
Thank you.
leave your brain to chance and let it happen, or you can be mindful about it and build your own brain by design.
I think you build your own is the answer.
Yeah.
Thank you.